And welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Scott Shute, who is an author and a thought leader and an executive at LinkedIn, who's got an interesting background. So let me just dive right in there. Welcome aboard, Scott.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I think you have one of the coolest titles in corporate America today. So your official title at LinkedIn that I got off of LinkedIn, so I'm hoping it's is head of mindfulness and compassion programs.
That is correct. I do have the coolest job. I do have the coolest job in corporate America, I think. It's pretty good.
I think it is. Now, do you have like the antithesis that's like the VP of stupidity or something? Or
wow, I don't know what that job would be, but I don't want anybody to have that job.
So what does a head of mindfulness and compassion program do?
That's a good question. Well, first, I had a career before this.
Yes.
For 25 years, I led customer service organizations.
Yes.
So my previous gig was I was the VP of Global Customer Operations at LinkedIn, leading all of the customer-facing non-sales stuff. And I've had a personal practice, like a meditation practice, since I was a kid. And about 6 years ago, I realized that LinkedIn was such an amazing place. It's a place I could bring this practice, and just kind of grew. I started by leading a meditation session. Mm-hmm. It grew and grew. And I know that there's a bunch of other volunteers. We created a mindfulness program at work. And then for me, there was this tipping point where our CEO was giving the commencement address at Wharton, and he talked about compassion. And after volunteering for 3 years, doing this mindfulness stuff, I was thinking, okay, it's time for me personally to invest in this, because I think I could make a living doing this, and I think it's needed in corporate America. But it's also time for us as a company to invest, because if we're saying, hey, compassion is the number one thing you can do to be successful in life and a business, and we send our employees back to their desk with that message, like, what does that mean? And so I made
it's not something you can have them go take a workshop on this for 2 hours and then come back to the grind and forget everything that you learned, because in practice it's different here.
Oh, maybe. At the time, we weren't doing anything. It was just that message. And so I made a pitch to say, let's make it real. So 2.5 years ago, started this role with kind of a blank slate and 2 parts: mainstream mindfulness, operationalized compassion. The mainstream mindfulness is just to make, let's call it mental exercise or meditation or things like that, just as ubiquitous, just as commonplace as physical exercise, as we're trying to build the well-being of our employees. And then, while that's interesting, to me, compassion's where the juice is, because this is how we operate. This is how we treat each other internally, but it's also how we treat our customers, how we sell, how we service them, how we build products. And that's a longer tail of things to work on. And so happy to
stay on the compassion piece for a bit, because in this almost still in the midst of COVID world that we're in, right? That compassion piece is interesting, right? Where early on, there were some companies that were incredibly compassionate. Hey, if you're having trouble, call us. If we're a software company, we'll give you more license, whatever it was, just sort of doing that both internally and externally, right? And I think that internal piece, let's start there.
Yeah.
I think a lot of organizations do this faux compassion externally because it looks good. And if it doesn't start inside, it doesn't stick. So any thoughts?
Sure. So internally, look, I think I have a more formal definition, but compassion is essentially when we're moving from me to we thinking, right? So selfish versus all of us, including ourselves. And so internally, think about that balance. Yes, you have to be, you don't have to be. It's great to be compassionate towards your employees. And there's a point where you still need to get the work done. So it's a balance of those two things. But I think you're seeing more companies really looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, okay, what do we need to do here? Because we ourselves as employees are struggling, and what would we do if our brother or spouse or son or daughter or grandma worked at this company? And so you're seeing companies do a better job with the benefits or how they're talking about employees or the value that they're placing on these employees. And then the flip side of that, I'll call it the dark side of compassion, is you still have to get stuff done, right? And I think there's a balance.
So stay there for a minute, because compassion doesn't mean we throw all our KPIs out the window and
That's right.
we just sit here cross-legged on the floor and ponder deep thoughts and all that.
That's right.
How do you have compassion in the constraints of a business, which is we have shareholders to serve, we have customers to serve, we have to get stuff done and typically profitably. So how do you thread that needle? Because that seems to be the magic.
I think it's being real with each other, right? We sometimes talk about business as, oh, we're family. Well, sometimes that's true, and sometimes it doesn't feel like that's true. Or sometimes you find out it's not true when the rubber meets the road of the financial part. But if you really are open and trusting with each other, you can have those conversations. It's like, hey, look, we're struggling right now as a business. And it's probably going to take more work. And I know that you also are struggling, and I'm also struggling. But what can we do together? Let's try to solve this together. Instead of just moving from a command and control, they're just, hey, just get it done, or hold totally hands off, oh, it doesn't matter if you get it done or not. It's like you said, it's threading the needle.
So I think that if you layer on top of that, we're living in an age right now, my 2 cents, where the lines are changing, the boundaries are changing, right? So when I was first entering the workforce, the mantra typically was check your bags at the door. I'm paying you. I got you for 8 hours. Make the widgets or whatever that is. And that's it. You can pick your baggage up on the way home and whatever. And that doesn't work. Right. But
no, we're realizing that as employers, we need to be aware of the person as a whole. Right. And of course, it's a lot easier to manage in a command and control environment. I'm paying you, you do what I say.
Yeah. Theoretically.
Right. Theoretically. I'm paying you to do what I say, but that doesn't work either, right? Because
but where I was going is, so pre-COVID, just in the last year and change and whatever, there are things that are open for conversation that wasn't. There's a huge sense of what is a manager or leader's responsibility around mental health of their employees, and that used to be whoa, we don't really go there unless it's if it's extreme obvious or typical operation is, hey, I'm a manager, I got 10 people working for me, Scott's having a tough time, a divorce or a parent with Alzheimer's, I have a little compassion. But now it's how do I manage this now, and what is the role and what is not the role? I don't know that we know the answers to those things yet, other than it's changing.
I think you're right. I think we're collectively trying to figure it out. Before 10 years, for sure 20 years, we weren't talking about mental health in the workplace at all, right?
No.
Maybe in your benefits team there was the emergency line, right? So we offered the equivalent of the ER. Hey, we have a suicide prevention line.
Right. Or if you have an addiction, but those are such the outlier extreme. They're real problems, but
exactly,
that's not the day-to-day stuff I'm talking about.
And so now we're realizing that if you think of that as the ER, we have the healthy vitamins along the way. And the healthy vitamins is you really, as a manager, learn to check in with your employees. You ask them not just how they're doing, but a question that gets at it. Hey, Peter, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing today?
Right.
It's okay, that's different. Because if I just ask you how you're doing, you're always going to say, yeah, good.
Right. If I say 6 and yesterday I was a 9, then you go, what's up? With that trend?
6. Okay, well, what do we need to do, or what would need to happen to get you at a 9, or what's going on, or how can I be of assistance? So just being human and showing that we care about our employees is step 1. And then I think we're all kind of learning where's the boundary? There's all kind of issues that we are just not prepared. And it's probably not our job as managers to take care of.
Yeah, we just don't know what those are now. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. I want to pivot for a moment, and I was scribbling some notes getting ready for today, and I put you in the category of sort of the internal thought leader. So you have a functional role at LinkedIn, yet you're a thought leader with a book that's just released, Full Body Yes, and your own sort of platform and all that. So that's an interesting place to be. And we work with a lot of folks like that. But when I say a lot, the universe of folks like that are not in the zillions, right? So how did you create not only the coolest job, but ultimately it is an internal thought leadership role? How did this get created? And sort of, I kind of get what's in it for you, but tell me about the benefits to LinkedIn and the other employees of having.
Sure.
having you there.
Sure. I mentioned a little bit about how we created it in this journey with the CEO and kind of my
Mhm.
own personal expertise. So it's kind of for me the right place, right time, right need. But the what's in it for LinkedIn, you could think of it as two parts. The mindfulness part, what's in it for LinkedIn employees, so therefore what's in it for the company
Yes.
is, look, we, LinkedIn, and many companies in the information age don't have hard assets,
Right.
right? So
Right.
we have employees, and we realize, and we really strongly believe that employees are our number one resource, and it's by a long ways. And so if we do everything that we can to maximize that resource, so employees are at their best, then we're going to get better results. Now, it just happens to be at a time when we're struggling with a global pandemic. And the pandemic's not just the pandemic, but it's a pandemic of loneliness, a pandemic of
Sure.
mental wellness and
Mhm.
struggle and challenge. And so what we're finding is that employees need this, and by this, I mean the mindfulness compassion program, more than they ever did. Because we're more than just teaching about meditation, which is a great practice, but it's not for everybody. We're teaching about mindset, about growth mindset,
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
turning every challenge into an opportunity and just building a healthier way to live. So that's what the employees get, and also what
Well,
the
so
employer
let me
gets.
stop you. So if we didn't have COVID, which
Yeah,
would have been nice,
yeah,
how would one go about sort of selling this internally at a company? You would need some
yeah,
level
yeah.
of
The
pain,
same way.
stress, something.
So, so as an example, I start with something, this line of questioning. Do you care about your employees? And I don't mean it in a smart ass way. I mean, like seriously, because some companies, if you sell a commodity, you could say, well, look, we just buy and sell whatever, copper, wool,
Yeah.
whatever. Like our employees are interchangeable. That's probably not true, but that's the other end of the spectrum. So most people are going to say, yes, of course we care about our employees. All right. Well, look, have you yourself ever had a really terrible day where no matter what happened to you, like you were a 3 out of 10 on the productivity scale or on the mood scale? Well,
Right.
yeah, of course. And have you, as a person, ever had a day where you were 10 out of 10, where you were just at your best? Like no matter what
Right.
happened, you were 10
Right.
out of 10. Well, what's the difference between those 2 days? Well, it's all the stuff going on between my ears, right? It's all how I deal with it. All right, well, what if you were able to then offer something to your employees which moved them from a 3 towards a 10? And it's not the magic 8 ball that gets you everything, but what
Sure.
if you were to improve 10% or 40% or 60% of the way? Like, what's that worth? Like, oh, well, that's worth
That's a lot.
billions of dollars.
Right.
The other kind of more, when I'm a little more annoyed way I talk about it is, well, do you care about your employees? Yes. Do you offer a gym at work? Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of companies do. It's like, why? Well, we want employees to be healthy. Why? So that they're at best. Okay, great. How much of your employee's job is spent like lifting boxes and moving stuff around the
Right.
office? Like,
You're
do you
talking
need them to
about
run?
right
Do you need
coders,
them
right?
to run a sub 6 minute mile? Like, is that important? Like, no, we're
Right.
information workers. Okay, great. Well, why not offer them something that allows them to be mentally sharp, that allows them to focus, that allows them to be better at a relationship? And it's like, once you go through this process, it's such a no-brainer.
But it's so it's for some organizations, there's a leap of the physical. So
Yeah,
we've moved the employee cafeteria from serving, fried chicken cutlet to
yeah,
having organic kale, and
yeah,
that's already happened, right?
sure,
Why?
sure.
Because we know, people are sluggish and weight and
Yeah,
cholesterol and all this stuff. And then we've got the gym because people want to work out and whatever. But the
yeah.
whole mental piece, and it started at Google with search
Search
with
inside yourself.
you
Yeah,
search inside yourself. So it's starting to happen, and it always
yeah.
seems to start on the West Coast for some reason, right? These
It's
things don't start in Indiana,
That's right.
right?
It's on the same journey. And there are people meditating in Indiana and
Oh, I'm sure.
Kansas and other places,
Yeah,
by the way. But you're right. You're right. It's on the same journey. Our grandparents did not exercise,
right.
right? They worked hard, but they didn't exercise. They weren't jogging for fun. They might go for a walk. In fact, funny story. I was with my mom a few years ago, and we were at an antique store. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, so wasn't a lot to do. So we went to this antique store, and I wanted to buy. They had these old magazines, and I wanted to buy a magazine from the year I was born, right,
Mhm.
1969. I was turning 50 at the time, and in this, because I wanted to see what the consciousness of the people was like.
Right.
And in this magazine, there was this article, among articles about, there was an advertisement for tobacco with a doctor a
Right.
medical
So
doctor.
the white lab coat, smoking Pall
as a
Mall
pitch
or
man.
whatever. Yeah.
Okay, in that same magazine, there's this article. There was a Midwestern swim team that had won a couple championships. So the reporter goes to find out what their success was. And the headline in huge font was, get this, athletes subject themselves to self-torture in order to win. And my
So
mind
self-torture is meaning like
self-torture.
working out?
Well, yeah. I mean, what do you think that, like, I was thinking about electroshock therapy or like starvation diet. You know what they were doing? They were lifting weights.
I was going to say, right, but pull-ups or something. Right.
Yeah. In 1969, the strangest thing in the world were these guys lifting weights. Okay, you fast forward 50 years, and not everybody does it, but we all know the benefits of lifting weights and strength training for our health. In the same way, mindfulness is on that same journey of normalization, where there's some early
I
adopters,
agree with
but
that,
there's
yeah.
still people who are like, what are these guys doing? But the science is there. 6,000 reviewed papers, peer-reviewed scientific papers about reducing stress, reducing anxiety, all that good stuff.
No, and it's, 10 or 15 years ago, those conversations were happening in the workplace, but not often, and only at certain, quote, types of companies. That it was probably an extension of the founder's philosophy, or, think Ben and Jerry's, or, whatever, sort of outliers. Now, it's not totally mainstream, but we're probably maybe a standard deviation away. We're close.
Yeah,
it will
it's
be.
getting
You
closer.
can see the date, where that's around the corner.
And I think what's really important is we take religion out of it, right? Because probably the early adopters, in the 70s or 80s or 90s or 5 years ago, were people who came at it from a spiritual bent. And that's probably where they discovered it. And so probably that created a lot of tension or division. If I'm a Christian or a Muslim, can I do this? Like, am I going to go to hell or something if I meditate at work? And now we've made it more secular. It's more about mindfulness. It's more about breathing. It's more about inclusion and using inclusionary language that everybody can relate to. And it just is.
I think
like
that's
physical
a great
exercise.
point, because in many companies, and there's still some today, that spirituality is branded, right? So this is a company that thinks in a certain way based on their principle, whatever, right? And I guess in some private companies, it's still kind of sort of maybe appropriate, although not really. But in order for it to go mainstream, it needs to be unbranded from a spiritual perspective, right? It needs to be universal. It needs to be all inclusive and all. Yeah, interesting. So if somebody is out there now and they're sitting at a large company and they're passionate about some sort of thought leadership, but they see a separation between church and state in terms of their job and not their job, how might you advise them to say, the thing that you dig, the thing that you're really into, that you love, that could be helpful to your colleagues and your organization and the teams around it, what might you suggest to them to start maybe planting seeds or thinking about if that one day could be on their business card as their title, not just their passion?
Sure. I would say start. So this whole thing started with me leading one meditation session 6 years ago, and there was one dude there. And he was just as terrified as I was, because I never saw him again. That's how it starts. And I volunteered for 3 or 4 years, just like following my nose, following my passion. And it just grew and grew. And, opportunity met skill. And here we are. So
when you say just start, so you put it out there, but was there a boss or two or whatever that was more encouraging? You just sort of did it and tested? Okay.
For me, yes. Like, I'm saying I had the benefit. I had the luxury of the CEO talking on stage at all hands about his own meditation practice. Our CEO was giving the commencement address at Wharton, talking about compassion. That's about as public as you get, right? Right. So I wouldn't be able to. I could have done some things, but I wouldn't have been as successful without Jeff creating this umbrella of safety for the topic. But even if you work in a place that is the antithesis of the skill that you want to bring, I still say start. Because here's what happens. The more you do it, the more it becomes your identity, the better you get at it, right? So if I lead a meditation session every week for 3 years, I'm probably a lot better at it after 3 years than if I don't.
Right.
Right.
So it's a forcing mechanism if nothing else. Right?
It's a forcing mechanism. And at some point, even for me, I got to the point where 4 years in, I'd gotten to the point where like I had to do it full time. I was going to quit my job and go do it full time somewhere.
Might as well be replace your love anyway.
it might as well be at the place I'm at. And it turns out that was exactly what they wanted and what I wanted, and it totally worked.
And the flip side of that might be, hey, if this isn't the place and it doesn't resonate here culturally or whatever, go try it somewhere else.
Exactly.
Right?
Then you can choose. Too. Right.
I like your framing of, hey, I was doing this anyway, and I'm just thankful that I was able to do it at a place, that I already knew and loved.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And this is what I tell, when I was a kid, when I was 18, I thought maybe instead of getting an engineering degree, which is what I ended up doing, maybe I'll move to New York and be a singer, right? And try to make it on Broadway. And my dad, I grew up on a farm, and so hard-earned money, right? And my dad and I had that mature conversation about, this whole thing and the practicalities of it. And he was right. I didn't want to hear it, but he was right. And the advice that I give to young artists, if you're going to go make a living as a rock star or as a poet or as a writer, it's like, that's not very practical. But if you are so on fire with it, like if you can't do anything else, not that you're not skilled, but internally you can't, then you should go try it. But if internally you're like, I kind of think I want to make a living as a poet, I'm going to tell you, like, no, you're not ready.
Be in 500, even when you're in at 500%, the probability of success is low. And if there's any doubts, move on. No, that's great. So I want to thank you for coming on board and sharing your story, and definitely interesting stuff on going from, I like just start, right? And
just start.
And if you're where you are right now because you just started and you got the book, and this is now your passion is your day job. Like, what's better than that? Like, that's pretty damn good.
It's pretty good, man. I'm grateful to do it. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.